Once upon a time, in the quiet village of Kalambari, nestled between ancient baobab trees and golden savanna grasslands, there lived a boy named Jabari. Kalambari was the kind of place where mornings began with birdsong and evenings ended with drumming and stories by firelight. It was a land kissed by sun and blessed by rain, where children ran barefoot through the dust and elders spoke in proverbs. Jabari, though just 16, was already known far and wide as a boy of quiet strength and gentle heart. He had been orphaned at birth when his parents were taken by a fever that swept the village like wind through tall grass. Since then, he had been raised by his grandmother, Mama Sua, a wise old woman with eyes like storm clouds and hands always busy with herbs or prayer beads. Despite his youth, Jabari worked harder than any grown man. He rose before dawn to tend to their mother's garden, fetched water from the river without complaint, and helped repair huts for widows and elders. What made Jabari truly special, though, wasn't his work or strength, it was his deep, unspoken bond with nature. Birds often landed on his shoulders. Monkeys followed him playfully as he walked through the village. Even the stubborn goats listened to him. The villagers whispered that Jabari must have the Numa, the spirit of harmony with nature. Some said he was blessed. Others said he was chosen. But Jabari didn't believe he was anyone special. He simply listened. He listened to the rustling trees, the humming bees, and the sighing wind. And he listened to Mama Sua's stories, tales of river gods, shape-shifting spirits, and ancient pacts between humans and animals. Still, Jabari's heart carried a quiet longing. He often watched the other boys laugh and boast about marriage and future wives, but Jabari only smiled. Though many village girls admired his kindness, none had yet stirred the roots of his soul. He believed, deep down, that true love was not about beauty alone, but about the soul's song matching another's. One night, under a crescent moon and the glitter of countless stars, Jabari lay on his grass mat outside, staring at the sky. A cool breeze carried the scent of wildflowers and distant rain. As his eyes began to close, sleep pulled him into a strange and vivid dream. In the dream, Jabari stood in a forest glowing with silver mist. Fireflies danced like stars in the air. Then, out of the shadows, came a snake, not a fearsome one, but graceful, with scales that shimmered gold and green like sunlight on river water. Its eyes were deep, luminous green, and they seemed to look straight through him. The serpent spoke, its voice soft like wind through reeds. Jabari, you are the chosen one. The time has come. Jabari opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. The snake continued, weaving through the air like smoke. The balance is broken. The old paths fade. You must walk between worlds, human and spirit. But beware. All gifts come with a cost. Before he could ask what it meant, the forest shifted, and Jabari jolted awake, drenched in sweat. The stars above him blinked peacefully, as if nothing had happened. But Jabari knew something had changed. The next morning, odd things began to happen. When he went to fetch water, the usual stubborn donkey walked beside him without a rope. As he passed the village garden, the wilting cassava leaves straightened. Birds chirped louder when he approached, and a baby antelope followed him for an entire hour before vanishing into the bush. The villagers began to murmur. Mama Sua only watched him with silent eyes, clutching her prayer beads tighter. That night, Jabari sat by the fire outside their hut, poking at the embers. Mama, he said softly, have you ever heard of a snake that speaks? Mama Sua's fingers froze mid-count. She looked at him long and hard before nodding slowly. There are stories, she said. Old ones. From before even my grandmother's time. The serpent of the green eyes, protector of the balance between our world and the spirits. Why do you ask? Jabari hesitated. She came to me. In a dream. She called me the chosen one. Mama Sua's face grew pale under the firelight. She whispered. Then she stood suddenly. Jabari, listen to me. Do not seek her. Such things are not meant for boys with bare feet and honest hearts. But Jabari couldn't ignore the call that echoed in his spirit. The next evening, he slipped away quietly into the forest, guided by a force he couldn't explain. The deeper he went, the more alive the world became. Vines shimmered. Frogs croaked in rhythm. The wind itself seemed to whisper his name. Hours passed until he came to a clearing he had never seen before, though he'd walked these woods since childhood. In the center stood a giant fig tree with roots like walls and branches that brushed the stars. And there, coiled at the base of the tree, was the snake from his dream. She raised her head slowly, gracefully. Her green eyes met his. "I was waiting, Jabari," she said in a voice like wind over water. Jabari knelt, not in fear, but in reverence. "Who are you?" "I am Nia," she said. "Daughter of the forest. Guardian of the forgotten ways." "Why me?" he asked. "Because your heart is still open. Because you listen. And because the world is out of balance, and only one who loves both spirit and soil can fix it." Jabari's breath caught. "What must I do?" Nia slithered closer, her emerald eyes glinting. "That is a story for another day. But for now, you must choose. Return to your village and forget this meeting, or walk the path between worlds and become something more." The wind hushed. Even the crickets stopped. Jabari stood tall, his voice steady. "I will walk the path." The snake coiled once, then shimmered, changing, shifting, rising like smoke until, in her place, stood a woman. She was tall, with skin kissed by leaves and hair flowing like vines. Her eyes were still green and glowing. She smiled. "Then we begin." The forest was still. A gentle hush had settled over the clearing, the kind of silence that feels sacred, too delicate to be broken by mere words. Jabari stood rooted to the earth as the green-eyed serpent before him shimmered and shifted once more. Where the coils of Nia had rested now stood a radiant woman. Her skin was the color of deep earth brushed with glimmering emerald patterns, like the markings of ancient leaves kissed by moonlight. Her hair, long and dark, seemed to ripple like a waterfall, and her eyes, though human in shape, glowed with the same wise, piercing light he had seen in the serpent. "I am Nia," she said again, her voice now filled with warmth and sorrow in equal measure. Half spirit, half serpent, born of the first forest breath and the river's song. Jabari felt the weight of her presence. She wasn't just a woman, or a snake. She was other, something older than any story, something alive with the rhythms of nature. "You are not dreaming," Nia said gently, reading the question in his heart. "You were called. You heard. And now you are here." Jabari's voice was quiet but sure. "Why me?" "Because you are unlike others," she said. "You walk with kindness. You listen to the earth. The world has tilted too far into greed, into noise and forgetting. The bond between humans and the spirit of the land is frayed. I am one of the last who still guards the old balance. But I can no longer do it alone." She stepped closer, her bare feet barely bending the grass. "You, Jabari, have been chosen. Not by me alone, but by the forest itself. It seeks your heart." A million questions bloomed in Jabari's mind, but only one reached his lips. "What must I do?" Nia raised her hand and placed it gently on his chest. A soft warmth passed through him, like sunlight filtered through green leaves. "You must walk beside me. Not just as a protector, but as my equal. As my partner in union. I offer you something sacred, a spiritual bond that transcends this world. Together, we can heal the divide between your people and the forest." Jabari's breath caught. "You wish to marry me?" "In spirit," she said. "It is not marriage as your people know it. It is older. Deeper. But there is one law that must never be broken." Her eyes grew solemn, and a soft wind stirred the clearing. "You must never speak of my true form to any human. Never reveal who I am or what I am. To do so would shatter the trust between us. And if that bond is broken, I will be lost to you forever. Jabari hesitated for a moment, not out of fear, but out of awe. He looked at Nia and saw not a creature of danger, but a being of beauty, wisdom, and sorrow. He saw in her the same longing he carried, the desire for unity, for peace, for a life rooted in love and truth. I accept, he said. I will walk beside you, and I will keep your secret. Nia smiled, and it was like sunlight on still water. She took his hand, and in that moment, the clearing bloomed. Flowers opened. The tree swayed with joy. A deer stepped out of the shadows and bowed its head. The forest had heard. And it had accepted their union. From that day on, Jabari returned to Kalambari, changed. No one noticed at first, except perhaps Mama Sua, who watched him closely with her wise eyes but said nothing. Jabari continued his daily tasks, helping elders, guiding children, and tending to his gardens. But those who looked closely could sense something new in him, an inner glow, a quiet joy. And with him, blessings followed. The crops in Kalambari grew fuller than ever before. The rains came at just the right time. Sick animals recovered. Even the stubborn river, which once ran dry during dry seasons, now flowed strong and clear. The villagers began to whisper of miracles. But Jabari said nothing. Each night, he would return quietly to the forest, to the clearing beneath the great fig tree. There, Nia waited. In her human form, she and Jabari would talk for hours, walk through the moonlit woods, and sometimes just sit in silence, listening to the rhythms of the forest heart. He told her stories of his childhood. She shared ancient songs forgotten by men. He taught her how to laugh like humans do. She taught him how to hear the voices in the wind. Though their union was a secret, it was no less real. They were bound not by ceremony, but by truth. And the land responded. Kalambari became known as a place of peace. Travelers came from distant villages seeking herbs, wisdom, and healing. Elders said it was as if the old spirits had returned. Children slept peacefully. Songs returned to the evening fires. Still, Jabari kept his promise. When friends asked about his happiness, he smiled but said nothing. When the village girls looked at him with admiration, he bowed respectfully but never strayed. His heart belonged to Nia. Mama Sua, too, remained silent. But one evening, as Jabari returned from the forest, she stood waiting. You are walking paths few have dared, she said softly. I know, Jabari replied. Do not let pride or fear lead you away from the truth of your bond. Spirit love is not like human love. It is fragile and sacred. I will protect it, he said. She nodded once, and they spoke no more of it. 1 year passed. Then 2. And Kalambari flourished. But peace, like all things, attracts both wonder and questions. The village elders, wise but wary, began to take notice. They saw Jabari's strange fortune, his quiet power, and his deep connection to the land. They respected him, but they were also afraid of what they didn't understand. Why does the rain come only for his crops? One murmured. Why does he not seek a human wife? Another asked. Whispers grew like vines. Even those who loved him began to wonder, what is Jabari hiding? But Jabari said nothing. He only returned each night to Nia, and their love grew deeper still. In her, he found not only companionship, but understanding, a soul who knew what it meant to be neither one thing nor another. A being who had to hide her truth to be safe. And in him, she found loyalty, a heart that saw beyond the surface, who honored the silent pacts that bound spirit and man. Yet change, as always, was coming. The forest winds carried warnings. The birds fell quiet some nights. And Nia's emerald eyes began to darken with worry. Something stirs, she said one evening, her hand resting on Jabari's. The balance still holds, but there is a shadow growing. Jabari squeezed her hand gently. We will face it together. And Nia smiled, though her heart grew heavy. She knew what he did not. That all unions must be tested. That even the strongest promises tremble when fear whispers in the ears of men. For many moons, peace blanketed Kalambari like morning mist over the fields. The crops thrived, the waters flowed, and laughter became the village's common tongue. But in the shadows of that joy, seeds of envy began to sprout, watered by silence, grown in suspicion. At the heart of that growing darkness stood the village chief's sons, Tono and Mosi. They were strong men, broad-shouldered and bold, raised with every advantage. But in all their strength, they had not earned the respect Jabari had. They saw how villagers gathered at Jabari's door, how his wisdom was sought before theirs, how even the children followed him with shining eyes. What has he done that we haven't? Mosi spat one evening. He plants seeds and watches them grow, Tono said bitterly. They call him a miracle worker, but he is just a boy with secrets. And secrets, as always, became the spark. One moonless night, Tono and Mosi slipped into the forest, following Jabari's familiar path. For weeks they had tracked him, watching from behind trees and tall grass. They saw him enter the woods alone. Always alone. But something about his return was different, his smile too serene, his spirit too whole. That night, they saw him again. Jabari stood in a clearing bathed in moonlight, speaking softly to the air. To the brothers, it looked like madness, his arms gesturing, his voice warm, responding to something they could not see. Then came a sound, soft laughter, like wind brushing reeds. Then the flicker of green light. Tono gasped. Did you see that? She is invisible, Mosi whispered. Or he's cursed. Either way, this is not natural. They fled back to the village with their fear clutched tight in their fist. Whispers began the next day. It started with old Mama Wetu muttering, the forest does not sing like that for just anyone. Then Bonagidi, the fisherman, added, I saw a serpent by his farm once. It did not flee. It watched me. By nightfall, a new word slithered through the village like a viper. Witch. Perhaps he made a pact, said the blacksmith. No man prospers like that without spirits, another added. Maybe he summoned demons, a woman whispered, clutching her child close. The word spread fast. Suspicion grew like fire through dry grass. Jabari noticed the change. Children stopped playing near his hut. Friends no longer called his name. Even Mama Sua looked troubled. He tried to carry on, to bury his fear beneath routine. But the forest no longer sang as sweetly. Even Nia, radiant and strong, seemed distant, her emerald eyes flickering with worry. They are afraid of what they do not understand, she said. But fear has the power to destroy what love builds. I will protect you, Jabari said. Nia shook her head slowly. You must protect the promise. That is stronger than me. But the pressure could not be held at bay forever. One evening, the elders summoned Jabari before the village fire. The chief sat in silence, his face unreadable. Tono and Mosi stood behind him, smug and stiff. Around them, the entire village had gathered, old, young, skeptical, afraid. The chief spoke first. Jabari. You are a son of Kalambari. We have watched your works. We have felt the blessings that follow you. But questions now cloud our hearts. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Is it true, the chief asked, that you consult with spirits in the forest? Jabari swallowed. He glanced toward the trees. Somewhere beyond them, Nia waited, her heart beating with his. He remembered her words, never speak of my true form to any human. Betrayal will end our bond forever. He began, his voice trembling. I walk with the forest. I listen. That is all. That is not all. Tono barked. We saw you. Speaking to someone, something we could not see. We saw the lights. We heard the voices. The villagers gasped. Jabari, the chief said sternly, we ask you now, not as accusers, but as your people, what truth lies in your heart? The world fell silent. Jabari could hear his own breath, the rustle of leaves far away. He felt the weight of every gaze, every frightened heart. They were not wicked people, only scared. But fear, he knew, had its own hunger. He closed his eyes. He saw Nia's smile. Her laughter. The way the trees bowed when she walked. The love they had shared beneath the stars. And he saw what would happen if he said nothing. The suspicion would grow. The fear would turn to fire. They might burn the forest. They might never stop. His heart broke. He opened his mouth. And spoke. She is real, he said quietly. Her name is Nia. She is a guardian of the forest, part woman, part serpent. She chose me. We are joined in spirit. It is because of her that the rains fall, that the crops bloom. It is her love that blesses this village. A stunned silence swept over the crowd. Then, a hiss of anger. A serpent spirit, someone cried. He made a pact with a snake, shouted another. Witch. Blasphemy. The villagers surged with noise, voices clashing like storm winds. Women clutched their children. Men reached for spears. The chief's face turned dark with fury. You were warned, he roared. No man may love a serpent. And then it happened. A great wind swept through the village square, scattering embers from the fire like stardust. The trees at the edge of the forest bent backward, as though pushed by invisible hands. Leaves swirled in the air. The temperature dropped. The moon flickered behind clouds. And in the center of it all, Jabari saw her. Nia. Her form shimmered, part woman, part serpent, her eyes glowing with a terrible sadness. She looked only at him. You broke the vow, she said. Her voice was not angry. It was heartbreak giving breath. I had to, Jabari whispered, tears sliding down his cheeks. They were going to destroy you. They didn't understand. A single tear rolled down her cheek. I warned you. The bond was sacred. And now it is broken. He took a step forward. Please. Nia. But before his hand could reach her, the wind howled louder. The leaves turned to dust. And Nia dissolved into the air, vanishing in a spiral of wind and sorrow, like smoke returning to the sky. Silence fell. Then the wind stopped. The leaves dropped. The forest stood still. And Jabari stood alone. The next day, the rain stopped. The crops began to wilt. The river slowed. Animals fled into the hills. Kalambari began to wither. And Jabari walked alone through the village, no longer feared, but pitied. The people avoided his eyes. Even Mama Sua turned away. He returned to the clearing every night. And every night, he waited. But Nia never came. Darkness fell upon Kalambari. It did not come with thunder or fire. No, it came quietly, like a thief, first stealing the wind, then the rain. Then the green from the leaves, and the song from the birds. The crops that once danced beneath the sun began to rot in their beds. Maize turned black at the roots. The yam fields hardened like stone. The rivers shrank, their banks cracking like dry lips. Chickens stopped laying. Goats bleated weakly and fell silent. And then came the coughing, deep, dry, relentless, from the old and the very young. Sickness spread like spilled oil. Kalambari, once a village of laughter, now echoed only with prayers and mourning. And at the center of it all was Jabari. He did not speak. He did not protest. He only watched. Silent. Still. Every step he took seemed to wither the earth beneath him. Children cried when they saw him. The elders no longer called his name. He had broken the vow. And now, the world was breaking with him. One night, when the moon was thin and pale, Jabari stood before his grandmother's old hut, now overgrown and abandoned. He knelt, pressing his forehead to the earth. "I was chosen," he whispered. "And I failed." He knew what he had to do. He would find Nia. He would make it right. Jabari left the village with nothing but the cloth on his back and a carved wooden pendant Nia had once given him. He walked into the forest, deeper than he had ever dared before. Days passed. Then weeks. He crossed rivers he had never seen. Climbed hills that whispered in forgotten tongues. He lived on roots and rainwater, slept beneath twisted trees, and followed signs only his heart could read. In a cave of echoing stones, he met the hermit of silence, a man who had not spoken in 20 years. Yet through ash and fire, he showed Jabari how to quiet his spirit, to listen to the sorrow of the earth. "You must become empty," the hermit wrote in the dirt. "Only then can you be filled with truth." In a jungle draped with silver vines, he met Grandmother Koma, a healer who brewed wisdom in gourds and danced with spirits by moonlight. She painted his face with sacred ash and sent him into a trance beneath a baobab tree. He saw visions. Nia, crying beneath the roots of the world. His village, drowning in dust. And himself, walking a path with no name, no face, no past. "You must give back what was not earned," Grandmother Koma told him. "Only sacrifice can restore the balance." Jabari continued on. In the high mountains, he faced the trial of flame, walking barefoot across burning coals while reciting every vow he had ever broken. In the cold caves of the Mistlands, he endured the trial of shadows, confronting a specter of himself, twisted with envy, pride, and fear. Finally, beneath a tree of whispers, an ancient voice spoke. "You seek the guardian's mercy. But mercy is not bought with tears, it is earned with surrender. What must I do?" Jabari begged. "Give up the gifts," the voice answered. "Give up your land, your name, your legacy. Give up all that Nia's love brought you. Walk not as Jabari the chosen, but as no one." Jabari wept. He thought of the farm he once tended, now gone. The villagers who once called him brother. The love that had made him more than a boy. He thought of Nia. Of the moment she vanished. Of the weight he'd carried since. And then, he stood. "I will give it all," he said. "I am no longer Jabari." He walked back to Kalambari, not as a hero, not even as a man with a name, but as a wanderer wrapped in humility. He went to the village square. The people stared, thin and pale from famine. But there was no hatred left in them. Only silence. "I have come," he said, "to return what was never mine. The land is no longer mine. The house is no longer mine. Even my name I leave behind. I walk now only as a seeker. Not of power, not of blessing, but of forgiveness." The chief, weary and ill, did not speak. No one did. But as Jabari, no longer Jabari, turned and walked back into the forest, no stones were thrown. No curses were spoken. Only the wind answered, brushing gently against his skin. He returned to the clearing where he had first met Nia. He knelt in the soil. "I have nothing," he whispered. "Only the truth." He placed the carved pendant at the base of the tree, then lay down on the earth. And waited. For hours. Then days. The forest breathed around him, but no voice came. Then, one morning, as dew kissed the leaves, a green snake slithered across his feet. It paused. Looked at him. And disappeared into the trees. He smiled. It was not forgiveness. But it was a beginning. The river had not forgotten. Its waters still sang the old songs, low and soothing, like a lullaby from the earth itself. Time had worn its bank smooth. Trees arched above it like guardians, their roots curled deep into the soil, whispering secrets to the wind. And there, by the edge of the sacred river, sat a man with grey at his temples and calluses on his hands. He had no name. He lived in a simple hut of woven reeds. Children from nearby villages called him Mtio, the old man of the river. They brought him fish. He told them stories. Some of the children said he spoke to animals. Some swore they saw vines bloom when he passed. But he never spoke of his past. Not of the ring of fire he once crossed. Not of the guardian he once loved. He simply listened. He listened to the river. One morning, just before the rains, as he sat with his feet in the water, the wind changed. The leaves above him shifted, not with breeze, but with purpose. The birds fell silent. And then, the water glowed. Not with light, but with memory. From the river's surface rose a figure, not stepping but floating, as if the very world lifted her in welcome. Her eyes shimmered like emeralds. Her skin bore the marks of serpent and spirit. Nia had returned. But not as the snake he once knew. Not as the hidden bride. She had come in her full, radiant form, the guardian of the forest, the keeper of balance, the spirit of the sacred wild. He stood but did not speak. He dared not. Tears welled in his eyes as he lowered his head in reverence. "You kept your promise," she said, her voice like rain on dry earth. "Even when no one watched. Even when it cost you everything." "I broke it once," he whispered. "But I gave what I could." "You gave yourself," she said. And the land remembered. She reached out her hand, and where it touched the riverbank, flowers bloomed, soft, silver-petal things that shimmered in the sun. "Your sacrifice restored the balance," she said. The spirits healed. The curse lifted. Slowly, the land began to breathe again. He thought of Kalambari, how green shoots had begun to return, how laughter once more drifted on the wind. He had heard it in the distance, never daring to go close. "You were tested not for strength," Nia continued, "but for truth. For humility. For love." He looked into her eyes, eyes he had seen in dreams, in leaves, in stars. "Are you here to stay?" he asked. Nia smiled. "If you will have me," she said. "Not in secret. Not in shadow. But in light. As a bridge between worlds, human and spirit, earth and sky." News spread like fire. The old man of the river had wed the forest bride. But there were no whispers this time. No fear. Only awe. For the people remembered the dry years. They remembered the rot, the silence, the sickness. And they remembered how the land had healed, slowly, patiently, like a wound kissed by time. When the ceremony was held by the river, no one dared interrupt. The trees themselves bent low, and the animals gathered in stillness. Nia wore a crown of woven vines. He wore the pendant she had once given him, long ago. And when they exchanged vows, the sky opened, not in storm, but in golden light. Rain fell, soft and sweet. Not to wash away, but to bless. Together, they founded a new village, Mtio, the river town. It was not built with walls, but with open hearts. Spirits and humans lived side by side. Children grew up knowing the names of the trees and the songs of the stars. And Jabari, yes, he took his name again, was no longer just a boy from Kalambari. He was the first guardian of the green. Nia, his bride, his guide, his equal, walked beside him. Not hidden. Not feared. But loved. And so the tale ends, not with a roar, but with a whisper. A whisper of water. A whisper of love. A whisper that says, even in silence, truth waits. Even in loss, love endures. And even in the broken, beauty can bloom again. The end.